Now, Helen Gurley Brown, the editor of Cosmo, you had some interesting conversations with her and you learned some interesting things you share in your book about how Cosmo got across a certain philosophy or message to women at the time. Right. Can you share more about that?
Right. She taught that sex without the kids and hard work will set you free. That was Gurley Brown's philosophy. She had been a copywriter in California. She was one of the biggest advertising copywriters in the country. She was very good at what she did. And then she took Cosmopolitan, which had been a homemaker's magazine, and turned it into a sex rag, basically. And it was very, very popular in those days. Cosmo was the hottest women's magazine in the nation. And that was her philosophy. Hard work and sex without the kids will set you free. She didn't have children. She was married, but she didn't have children, nor did she want them. She said children were more of a nuisance than a blessing. And you could get married, but you should have abortions or you should use the pill. And if the pill failed, you should have an abortion.
Can you tell me more how she instructed you and other writers, to sell her particular ideology?
We made up a lot of those stories. It was just, for example, a young woman, her name is Mia, she goes to Paris, she meets a man on the Champs-Elysees. That night, they fall in love that day. They go to hotel on the left bank, and the next morning, she knows that she's in love. It's all beautiful. It was all made up. There was no Mia, there was no hotel on the left bank. It was all an illusion. And we created this fantasy world. The Cosmo girl, at least in the beginning, before a lot of women began to buy into it, the Cosmo girl was just a sexual fantasy. She was a marketer's dream, however, because she would work hard, and she was on the pill, and she would get an abortion, so they weren't going to have to fire her for being pregnant because she was never going to get pregnant. Okay, she didn't press for working women's rights. She didn't press for family rights. She didn't press for child care. She just worked hard and for the corporation. Basically, she was a man.
So it would make sense. I mean, Helen Gurley Brown's sexual revolution. Then, what was abortion to them? How did abortion fit in with their plans?
Well, first of all, Helen Gurley Brown, I don't know if she ever had an abortion. She did not get married until she was 37. She was married for 50 years to the same man. But the reason abortion fit into her plans of the way women should get ahead was because she was selling the life that corporate America wanted women to live. So that they could have women working, but they wouldn't have to mess around with all that.
So in that way, pregnant women and moms were an inconvenience to Helen Gurley Brown, just like they were to a lot of employers.
There was a secret that nobody knew, is that mothers were not actually in the magazine. You never saw a mother in the magazine. You never saw a child in the magazine. Propaganda is half-truth, selected truth, and truth out of context. It isn't just a bunch of lies. And one thing that people don't recognize about propaganda when they look at it is look for the things that aren't there. The things that are invisible. The mother and the child was invisible in the Cosmo girl philosophy.
So Helen Gurley Brown, she has this magazine. There's no kids, there's no women, there's no pregnancy. It's about sex, it's about products, it's about this materialism.
Right.
How did that flesh with her own lifestyle? Because from all accounts, she married one guy and expected him to be faithful to her and lived her life out with him.
Right. They were married for 50 years. Remember, she didn't get married until she was 37. And Helen said that this was the way she had lived in the beginning. This is how she got so far ahead. She urged young women to sleep their way to the top. Sleep with the boss if he's a married man. And she said, it's good to sleep with a married man.
Women sleeping with her married husband. So that was more other people should live that lifestyle. Not her and her family.
Not her family, not her husband, especially not her husband.